all about writing with Ben and Sara.
Welcome to All About Writing, the podcast that covers everything about the world of writing from the inside out. This is episode 52, part 9 on our series on getting started. I'm Ben, here with my co-host Sara, who is an award-winning, best-selling author, screenwriter, editor, and TED Talk presenter.
And I'm Sara, here with my co-host Ben, who is an award-winning, best-selling author and ghostwriter, editor, and publisher. And today, when we're talking about getting started, we are going to talk about researching. And I can't believe we've spent an entire year podcasting every week, basically, and we've never talked about research. And I feel like I spend 90% of my time researching for a book I'm either writing or I'm going to write. And I can't believe we waited this long to talk about it because my whole world is researching.
Okay, so I think we've got the right person here today to talk about research. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, Sara writes primarily historical fiction, and that is definitely a genre that is well known for requiring research. Because if you're going to write about a period in history, trust me, your readers know the details. You better get it right. So, Sara, walk us through it. How do you get to where you are?
Well, I do want to make sure that people understand that the internet is a double-edged sword. And I started researching for historical fiction when I was in middle school. I still have drafts of things I've never published. They're not bad, but they're not good. But I did I found researching to be so interesting. And I spent a ton of time doing it, probably more than I ever need. I still have the research from those notebooks. And I think some of it's even wrong now because there's been more archaeological digs since 1997. And the thing was back then, there really wasn't internet the way we have it now. And so to get information, you had to go to the library, you had to get books ordered in, you had to read physical books and take notes and ingest all of that information. Now we have the internet, which is awesome because you can just Google things. And, if you're lucky, old books have been scanned in. If things are in a foreign language, we have access to tools now that allow us to translate things very quickly. And so that's exciting. So you have access in a way to things that you might not have had in a library, even out of print books that weren't in libraries. Now you can get them. But with that access also comes a lot of false information, incorrect information. If AI is pulling it from multiple URLs and half of them have bad information, you're having to sift through not true stuff to get to the nuggets, and that actually can be more time consuming because then you're almost having to triple check everything as opposed to this is in a book, this has been vetted, this is true. Now is this true? Let me see if it's in 17 other places. And on the record, I am going to say this, please never use Wikipedia as a source for anything you write, no matter the genre.
Mm-hmm.
Like, ever. Use Encyclopedia Britannica if you're going to use something. Like, do not use Wikipedia. Unless you're using it and you go down to like the bottom where they have the bibliography and then you click on the bibliography and you go and like that's the only good part.
It's an interesting challenge. You're right. I mean, just like self-publishing has changed our industry in that it has broken down the barriers for people to get books out, but that means that not every book you read is actually going to be any good. It's the same thing with research, is that, oh yeah, anybody can put information up on the internet, but is it actually vetted? Is it actually correct? It's so hard to tell if you're just sort of doing a quick survey. So interesting challenge that we have made for ourselves as a society.
Right. And sometimes so I want to talk a little bit about what constitutes proper research. And this is true no matter the genre, because even if you're writing contemporary romance, you might stumble across something with your characters that you personally just don't know or don't have a lot of experience, and you have to research. So the first thing is, obviously, in my opinion, books that are actually printed by a publisher, because again, there's an entire team like checking facts before those things go to press.
Hmm.
Um, Ideally, you would, especially for me with historical fiction, I go to books, reprints usually, but books that existed in that time period. So if I'm talking about food, I've got some recipes like from the reprints of cookbooks from the 1700s. So I know that those recipes existed in the 1800s. Or I have My Life on the Plains, which was published by Custer in the 60s and 70s. So like these are publications that existed in the time period I'm writing about. So I am not only touching that history physically, but now I have, okay, well, this is what they were talking about, or this is what was going on. This was the society they live in. So it's not even just research books, but it's books from that time period, which you should get access to. Um, Depending on what your subject matter is, I would even go so far as to say, like, white papers, archaeological papers, anthropology studies, things like that can also be considered decent research, as well as, and this is like, I'm just puking all of this out because I love this so much, but um, the as much tactile stuff as you can do is also research. So going to the places that you're writing about, if you can, if it's safe, if you can afford it, things like that, or um, you know, if you're writing about something in the Renaissance, go to a Renaissance fair and maybe rent a costume for the day and get a feel for how constricting it is, or how tight the corsets really were, or the weight of the skirts on your hips. Um, Anything you can do to immerse yourself in the world you're writing gives yourself a much richer tapestry that you can then put on the page, because you have a wealth of knowledge that's not even just reading a book.
Yeah. I was thinking of locations too, because if you're writing modern fiction and you're basing it, say, in Chicago, if you've never been to Chicago, well, at least look at a map of Chicago. You know, you can look at Google Street View. You can find all kinds of resources that just give you a sense of what the place is. And I love maps because it tells me, oh, okay, interesting. There's a church just across the park from that street. Well, that may or may not be relevant to the story that I'm telling, but it's neat to know that. And it might give me new ideas. And what is my character actually looking at as they walk down the street? I can describe it pretty accurately. And someone who does live there will go, wow, he knows our place pretty well. That's cool, right? Like there are a few, I'll almost call them cheats like that. You know, look at a map, look at Street View, look at anything you can find that shows the place where you're writing about to get a feel for it. It's best if you can go there, sure, but we all live in the real world and have jobs, so it's unlikely that you're going to be able to do that if it's really far away. But you can still do a lot of research just to make yourself familiar with the place.
Right, right. And I'm writing in the past, so there are constraints, than if you're writing a modern story, right? Or even
Mhm.
like you write sci-fi, which people, just like fantasy, some people are like, "Oh, it's fantasy, you just get to make it up." Yes, but
Hi.
usually you're using stuff that is grounded in our world to make it relatable, and you're still going to have to do research. I mean, I write fantasy, and I've probably spent, I don't know, 50 hours just reading folk tales because they feed into the fantasy world, and I get ideas and it starts to generate fantastical, ideas or magic or things from a foreign country that I never would have had because I didn't grow up with the folk tales of Persia. But
Yeah.
now I
Yep.
have ideas, and so same with you with sci-fi. People go, "Oh, well, but you can't research because aliens." And I think that that's a misconception too. I think you probably spend more time researching than anyone would ever suspect.
Yeah, it's true about sci-fi. Some people who don't really know it that well will think, "Oh, you just make stuff up and off you go, pew pew pew." But a lot of science fiction has a lot of science in it, and if you want to write particularly hard sci-fi, which is a subgenre of sci-fi, which means you cannot break the laws of physics as we understand them today, you better know your stuff. You better know, that there's no such thing as artificial gravity. If you want to have your characters have gravity, they either have to be on a planet or they have to be in something that's spinning with that centrifugal force, right? Like there are ways to solve the problems that you have, but you have to understand what the laws of physics are. And I have found, I've been writing in this genre for long enough that the leading edge ideas of physics have changed. You know, 20 years ago, if you were cutting edge, you would talk about string theory because everybody knew string theory was the ultimate answer to the universe, and you had to read what string theory was, try and understand it, which nobody does, by the way, but you would try your best to at least have something that okay, I think I have a concept of this, I'm going to use it in my book. Well, surprise, string theory's been debunked now, and nobody believes it anymore. So any sci-fi book that was written 15 years ago, you're kind of like, ooh, yeah, that's unfortunate. That didn't age well. And you don't think it will. You think that you're safe with science. But nope. If you're at the cutting edge and you're reading about the most avant-garde theories in science, no, they're just ideas right now. Scientists are working to prove them, but they may discover, we didn't get that one right. Let's go this way. So, looking back at some sci-fi classics like Robert Heinlein or Isaac Asimov, brilliant writers, really knew their stuff, but they were writing in the 50s, and it shows sometimes. It really does, and you just kind of have to shrug. Well, it was a thing of its time, so let's just go with it.
Yeah.
But as an author, even even when you're in a make-believe world like sci-fi often is, you still have to do research. Like what science, what physics, what chemistry, what biology are relevant to what you're doing, and you can't just make stuff up because your readers will know, and they'll just go ugh, and they'll just toss this piece of junk. So even if your story's great, you can really turn people off if you get the facts wrong.
Right, right. And I think that's something, depending on what you're writing, you have to understand that what you're using as your facts are, in fact, theory, not truth. And science, chemistry, biology, we're constantly getting new information about those things. So be cognizant of that when you're using ideas. Same thing, I mean, people who write ancient historical fiction
Mhm.
and have written about the slaves building the pyramids in Egypt, and now modern archaeology has proven that they weren't built by slaves. They were built by paid artisans. We have the tablets like
Mhm.
proving who was paid how much for how many months. Like that whole theory we've had for decades is now out the window. Now, granted, you have to be a geek who, reads Archaeology Magazine the way some of us do, but a lot of people who read that kind of fiction also are reading. I mean,
Mhm.
that's where you have to understand too. You're not only just researching to get it right, you're researching it to make the experience for your audience who also probably cares about these things. Like you said, they'll know, but it also is like you get to teach with your research,
Mhm.
which is why you want to do a good job. Because if you're misconstruing societal norms of the early 1900s, some people can go ahead and, that it's almost like you owe it to your readership to have a well researched book because you don't want to misconstrue truth. If I were to talk about how society was structured in my books and I got it wrong, I'm not really doing a good job writing historical fiction then. Then I'm just like almost doing speculative,
Mhm.
historical fiction. Like this is how, and so research to me is also a contract with my readers that I'm doing my due diligence so that I can present to you the most um well well constructed story dependent on no matter the genre.
Yeah, and it's interesting actually. What you're hinted at there is that sometimes when you're researching how things worked in the past, you might come across social norms that we really don't like today. And, you know, what do you do with that? You can build it into your story and make it part of the tension, or, you could make your character the exception, who bucks that trend, sure. But if you're going to do something like that, it has to still be realistic. Like, your plucky heroine might, you know, break out of the patriarchy, but if you're writing a realistic story, there are going to be consequences, you know, stuff like that. So I agree. It's really important to get it right. you can twist the way things were. I mean, that's part of what drama is why we write stories, create the tension, because someone is breaking away from the mold. Someone is changing the norm of whatever, wherever they are. That's part of drama. But how the society reacts to that, I think, has to be as true to reality as possible to make it convincing. Because you're right, you're serving your reader by telling them the truth. This is how it actually was. I'm telling you a good story, but be conscious of this.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think, bottom line, what I want people to take away is researching should be fun if you're doing it because you love it, but it also you should make sure you're not just doing a dirty internet search and copying the first thing you see. Dive several pages into your internet search and see if you're reading the same thing over and over and over again. And even then, I would still go to, books. I've read stuff about some of the characters I've written that were based in real historical settings, real historical characters, and things that used to be said about them. If you look at the portraiture of the time of, for instance, I wrote a book, the Sultana of Suleiman the Magnificent. In the 1500s, he had a wife, and everyone says, well, her name was Roxolana because she was Russian and had red hair. Some BS thing, right? And I'm like, okay, but she's not from the part of the world that usually has red hair, and we don't know actually where she's from. We do not have actual historical data about where she was born. Was it Poland? Was it Ukraine? Was it Russia? What was her name? It's all been lost to historical record, and then you look at actual portraits painted of her while she was alive, and you're like, pretty sure her hair is blonde. And then you look at portraits of her son, who he has a, Muslim father who is dark everywhere, and his mom and he has blonde hair. Probably she wasn't a redhead, but that has been the norm for hundreds of years. But it takes you kind of peeling back and starting to look at different ways of framing that and asking questions and then trying to see if the research backs that up. And that's where you can't even just go off of what you're going to read everywhere, because it's not necessary. It's just sometimes even facts get repeated incorrectly so long they're taken as fact, and in reality they might not be.
Yeah.
So you get to
Yeah.
excavate.
I have an interesting example of that. Years ago, I was a huge fan of King Arthur and the Arthurian legends, and I read a lot of Arthurian books, just trying to just diving into this. But I decided, okay, I want to write an Arthurian book, but I want to know what the real story is. I want to know what the real original myth is, so that I can build from there. Because I realized there's been lots of exaggerations over the years. So I was researching, and I researched for a very long time, read lots of genuine historical books looking for the true Arthur, et cetera, et cetera. And I came to the conclusion in the end, there is no one myth of Arthur that everything else comes from. It comes from a whole bunch of different places, and most of the Arthurian ideas that we have come from two very different sources. One is from England, a few hundred years after he would have the 800s. The other is from France in the 1200s. And neither of them are the real story, because there isn't a real story. It's just myth. And so that was a funny example of where I did all the research and eventually just threw up my hand and said, okay, I can do whatever I want here, because there is no truth. It's just whatever I want it to be. So I am free to pluck from wherever I want and make up my own stuff if I want, just to tell the story that I want to tell. So occasionally, when you do your research, you will find there is no answer.
Right.
But most of the time you can. And even then, I still had to research, when did the Romans leave Britain? What was society like there? Because if I want to base it somewhere in history, I still need to know what that is.
Right. Even though you're writing mythology, you're still I still have to put it in a real place. Yeah. I mean, even fantasy. I mean,
Yep.
Harry Potter is rooted in our real world, but it's
Yep.
fantastical.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely fantasy. Yeah, if you're gonna have a sort of a medieval European feel, You got to understand how it works. Or is it going to be a Roman feel, or is it going to be, a Chinese feel? Like what feel are you going for? A Polynesian feel? You
Right.
still have to understand what that is to make it
Right.
relevant.
I mean, Game of
Um,
Thrones does the same thing too. I mean,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
complete fantasy, but it's clearly before gunpowder was invented. You
that's right.
know,
It's
like
it's eternally consistent. Yeah, yeah.
right,
It has its
right,
rules, which
right,
which the author has to understand before they go in.
right.
If you're writing some kind of fantastic fiction that isn't based in reality, that's an important thing for the listeners to know, is that you still need to do your research enough to make your own rules that you can then follow, which
Yes,
could be a lot of fun, right? Our heroes can't do anything. There are restrictions, and the restrictions are what makes the drama, because there's something that's stopping them from doing what they want because of this. But you need to understand why and make it so. I know my current sci-fi series. It's space pirates, and I from the beginning said, you know what, don't think too hard about the science. This is not hard sci-fi. This is space fantasy. It's just fun. But I did lean heavily on the Age of Sail, Admiral Nelson and all that sort of thing. And so now I find myself, as I'm writing about a space fantasy, looking up what are the names of the sails from 17th century warships. Like, I know what a spritsail is and a top gallant is, and I know these things because they're kind of relevant to what I want to say. Now, if I want my characters to have the look and feel of that age of sail that I'm evoking in space, I need to do my research to know what the names of the sails are. So it's a really obscure little thing, but like you said, research can be fun. And damn it, I want to know. I want to know what a top gallant is, so I'm going to look it up. So there we are.
yes. Curiosity is the root of all of this.
Yeah, and it can be a lot of fun. So,
Yes.
any last thoughts on research, Sarah?
No, other than I just, love it a lot, like sometimes more than the writing itself.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, last warning to our listeners, don't get sucked down into the research hole forever. Eventually you got to come back up and
Yeah,
actually write
right.
something. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So
Fair warning.
we encourage you to do so. And on that happy note, that's our show for today. Don't forget to subscribe to miss so you don't miss any of our chats, and feel free to leave a review because it really does help us a lot. You can catch up with Sarah at sarahdahlman.com and on Instagram.
And you can find Ben at bennettrcoles.com as well as on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you again for joining us today. Please do reach out if there's any topics you'd like us to cover. Otherwise, we will see you again when we next chat all about writing.
This has been All About Writing with Ben and Sara.